Good afternoon, Mariners. Dylan Flynn here from the Tropical Analysis Forecast Branch with the Atlantic Marine Weather Briefing for Thursday, June 8th, and we're going to discuss conditions through the weekend and out to Tuesday morning, June 13th. We'll look at the current surface analysis, and we see high pressure is the dominant feature here in the central subtropical Atlantic, with an approaching low pressure system and associated cold front just coming off the southeast U.S., and there is a relatively tight pressure gradient between those features, but overall there's really not much going on. We don't see any major features causing big impacts today. There are a couple tropical waves in the Atlantic, as well as two in the southern Caribbean. Good news in the tropical weather outlook, we don't expect any tropical cyclones to develop over the next 7 days. And we'll take a look at today's marine conditions. Here's that high pressure I pointed out on the analysis. With the pressure gradient here, you can see in the isobars, generating some moderate southerly to southwesterly winds in the western Atlantic. That same high pressure is causing a gradient through the Caribbean Sea as well, with some strong easterly winds in the south central Caribbean and moderate to fresh easterlies in the eastern Caribbean. Nothing going on in the Gulf of Mexico. We don't expect major impacts throughout the weekend there. For wave heights, we do see seas building into the 10-foot range in the central Caribbean and about 6 to 8 feet or so in the western subtropical Atlantic. For Friday morning, high pressure remains in place. This pattern is relatively unchanged. We do see the low pressures pop off the coasts of the Carolinas and Georgia, but this is going to be a relatively weak frontal system. We don't expect major impacts here. We just see that same southeasterly to southwesterly flow in the western Atlantic and a little bit of strong winds here in the southern Caribbean. For Saturday morning, we see a slight improvement in both the Atlantic as these winds have died down to about the 15 knot range or so throughout the majority of the western Atlantic. We also see some improvement in the Caribbean, now just with fresh easterly winds, and that's due to this high pressure ridging in from the Gulf of Mexico, reducing the gradient through the Caribbean Sea. Essentially no change for Sunday. We do start to see some moderate return flow here in the western Gulf of Mexico, but other than that, no big change to the forecast. And we'll look ahead to Monday. We start to lose the ridge through the Caribbean, so we pick up those strong winds in the south central Caribbean again as seas rebuild up to 10 feet. But other than that, we're not expecting major impacts. There is a weak cold front here in the Atlantic, but high pressure on either side and mostly favorable conditions there. And then finally, we'll look at Tuesday morning. As the gradient starts to rebuild, we see a larger area of strong winds in the south central and southwestern Caribbean Sea as the seas build about 9 to 11 feet. Otherwise, the forecast remains relatively unchanged for the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic. And then finally, I just added a bonus slide here for an El Nino advisory that was issued today. We've been several years in La Nina and neutral conditions, but we finally ticked over to El Nino officially as of today, and we expect those conditions to last through the next 6 months and beyond with relatively high confidence. As you can see in this slide here, sea surface temperatures in the tropical Pacific have warmed above normal, which triggers the El Nino event. And El Nino has a lot of climate follow-on effects that are known. Of particular interest in the Atlantic is reduced tropical cyclone activity. El Nino should work to suppress our tropical cyclone activity in the Atlantic. However, the competing factor this year is that Atlantic sea surface temperatures are also enhanced, which should increase tropical cyclone activity. So we have these two competing factors, which is what caused NOAA to release their tropical cyclone forecast for the season at a near normal season. So because we have these two competing factors, the official forecast is for a near normal season for tropical cyclone activity in the Atlantic. And that's the update for this week. I'll give you another update on Sunday evening.